Right on. Well, welcome, Graham and Darren.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, buddy.
To skies over Grimerica.
Excellent.
I'm looking forward to getting this segment, good and ironed out. Yeah. So this is our second. Why don't you go? I mean, the last one I think went well, but I think we'll iron it out a little more this time, and away we go.
Yeah.
We got a lot of good feedback. It's good practice for our video skills, endeavors and practicing our video. So,
yeah, great. Well, thanks for having me back. It's December 6th here in 2017. So this is the December edition for the Skies Over Grimerica. And we'll talk about some of the things going on in the night sky and also their connection to ancient myth and ancient wisdom.
Sounds good. The best thing about the show is learning about your work, David.
Hey, well, thanks a lot. The best thing about the show is the vibe that you guys have created. But I'll launch into it unless you want to chit chat about other stuff.
No, let's do it.
So here's the outline that similar outline to what I had last time. We'll talk about where the moon is because that really is going to impact your success when you go out to look at stars. We'll talk about any meteors that are in the area during the month of December, where any planets are, that if you want to go out and see the planets. This is the December solstice coming up. So we have a lot of the ancient wisdom really around the world uses these great stations of the year, of the two solstices and the two equinoxes. They are they're like the pillars that hold up the whole system. So we have a lot going on, especially around the December solstice. Then we'll talk about some constellations that you can go out and see in the night sky. There's some really beautiful and exciting ones coming up now, and their relation to some of the myths. And if we get to it, some of the meaning. And feel free to jump in with questions, comments, or, if I say something that's not clear, help. The listeners are relying on you guys to jump in and stop me if I'm saying something that's not coherent. All right. So last time, Darren came up with a great idea. I spent a lot of time talking about where the moon is, how the moon moves through the sky. And Darren said, hey, let's just call that the sweet spot, when the moon starts to move out of the way of seeing the constellation. So I created a sweet spot chart here, and that is your December 2017 sweet spot chart that shows in green.
Oh, nice.
Basically the best times, the best days when the moon is starting to get out of the way. So here we are on the 6th as we're recording it right now. This is when the moon is rising in my latitude. It's a few minutes later where you guys are, but it's not really that big of a difference. So when the moon is full, it's going to be right in the middle of the sky at midnight. So it's going to start off on the eastern horizon around 6 p.m. or a little bit later. It depends on the daylight savings and those kinds of games that people play with the times. But the moon rises, as you can see, approximately an hour later each night. So if it's rising at 8:30 tonight, it'll be rising at 9:40 tomorrow night. So this means that before it rises, you've got no moon in the sky. So that's good. But once it starts coming up, when it's full, it really dominates the sky. But what's happening here is after we get to full, it's getting smaller and smaller. Last quarter basically means a half moon. And then we get to new moon. We talked about that's when there's no moon visible at all. But look at what's happening. The moon's coming up later and later. So you have until almost midnight on this Saturday before the moon comes up. And then when it comes up, it'll be basically what we would call a half moon. Really, when it's full, if you think about it, you're seeing half of the moon, right? You're seeing the half that's towards us. The half that's towards the sun you can't see. So
so last quarter is a half moon in the sky.
It's a half moon. It's really a quarter of the whole sphere of the moon because the moon's a ball, right? We don't have any flat mooners out there. Nobody argues that the moon is a sphere. So the full sphere, half of it is visible on the full moon, a quarter of it's visible.
I wouldn't be so sure about that, David. There's definitely some people that think the moon is a...
So I got a couple moon questions while we're on the moon. So
Sure.
Today at work, even last few days when it's been is it one of those super moons or a harvest moon or something where it's been pretty big and bright, and it seems brighter in the day. Like today there was about like 3/4 moon, so I don't know what that it's just past full or whatever, but it's in the daylight sky, bright. And then the funny thing is today I was looking at it and watching it in the sky, and it was about 30, 40 degrees up, and there was a contrail way out there, and they were visibly moving apart from each other. So obviously the contrail was moving, but it really give this weird visual effect. And then what was my other question about that? So is there something about it being that visible in the day that also represents it being a harvest moon or a super moon or something like that? Because normally it doesn't seem like it's that visible during the day, but it was like quite a ways up there, and it was really bright in the day.
Right. Yeah. So when it's now all of a sudden recently they're talking about it's a super moon. I saw somebody was complaining, saying, "Look, I feel like we have a super moon every other month now."
Exactly.
But what a supermoon means is when you have, or it's a new term, I think, but the moon on its orbit is not always the same distance from us. So it's got it's farther away, and then it's closer. So a supermoon is when it's a full moon at the same time that it's at its closest point. So it does look bigger and brighter. And I was actually very impressed this past Sunday when it was rising, when it was really low. It was
it's huge.
The biggest I've ever seen.
I couldn't believe it. The supermoon. I couldn't believe even this morning, like in the morning light, probably I'd say 20 minutes, half an hour before the sun rose, maybe tops an hour before sunrise, and it was amazing how clear and vibrant, clear and almost high. It still looks so high def first thing in the morning. It's amazing.
That's what I was saying. And it was 30, 40 degrees up, super bright in the daytime.
Right. So in the daytime, I mean, we can see the moon during the daytime. So actually, I stopped putting the times of the rise of the moon after. See, it gets earlier and earlier. At new moon, it's basically rising with the sun. Then it's rising just after the sun, but it's not really in the way for stargazing because it's rising now in the daylight hours. But you can see it in the day, obviously, even when it's right now. The technical term for it is gibbous.
Waning gibbous, right?
Right now, it's a waning gibbous moon. So it's gibbous when it's between a half moon and a full moon. And so it's getting slimmer and slimmer, but it's still fatter than a half moon right now. So it's gibbous. It's a waning gibbous. But I don't want to spend too much time on the moon. I mean, if you want to ask questions.
No, I just have one last little thing. When it was setting. No, rising, was it setting or rising? When it was rising on Saturday, like you said, it was on the horizon. And it was huge. And my moon app showed it was different time. Like it was fucked up. So I don't know if that was just like a GPS thing or. Usually the moon app says it's rising at whatever, 5:21. It was really 4 something and it was rising. So, anyways, not really a question. I don't know.
I'm not an expert on the motions of the moon. I'm mostly focusing on the stars, but the moon is tremendously important. It does influence us. It obviously influences the tides on Earth, which are these gigantic oceans. And if we're 7/8 of water, people say, hey, it only stands to reason that it would move us as well.
Yeah.
And it certainly lines up with a lot of things like the gestation period of a human being inside the mother. It lines up with the woman's cycle. It lines up with all kinds of things. And these heavenly bodies do impact us. The arrangement of where the planets are. I wrote a blog post since last time. I wrote a blog post called "The Gods Are Real," talking about the position of Jupiter and Mars to the Earth, and how back in the 50s, the RCA company, which is the radio broadcasting company, was finding changes in the shortwave radio wave propagation based on where the planets were. And they published a paper, and I referenced it, and they found that when the planets are in these certain alignments, sending signals from North America across the Atlantic to Europe was impacted by the positions of the planets. So the positions of these heavenly bodies actually impacts things in a way that we're really not taught about in school. It really was an eye-opener to me. And it's an interesting post that people can check out. It's called "The Gods Are Real," and I published that sometime in November after I was on the last time for Skies Over Grimerica and before this one. So, but anyway, the new moon is always a great phenomenon. If you look the night after new moon, see the moon is ahead of the sun before new moon. You see, it's rising later and later, but the sun's basically catching up to it. The moon is rising at 3 a.m. The moon is rising at 4 a.m. See, so the sun is catching up. The moon is rising at 5 a.m. Pretty soon the sun is rising with the moon, right? The moon's rising later and later, or you could think of the sun gaining on the moon. Then the moon gets overtaken by the sun on new moon, and now the moon is going to be trailing the sun after that. So on the 19th or the 20th, there will be a moon right behind the sun. So as the sun is sinking into the west, you'll see the beautiful sliver of the new moon right behind the sun, very low in the sky in the west. So that's always a really beautiful phenomenon. And then that crescent will get thicker and thicker until you get to this first quarter. And then the moon will start to dominate the sky. So not as good star watching here after Christmas.
So we're in it already. We're in it to win it pretty much, like tomorrow even.
Yeah, so here's
dark
where
here
we
at
are
4
today.
o'clock now, so in Canada.
Yeah, so you can see the moon. I mean, you can see the stars without any moon until 9. You can see, if you're, some listener may be, hey, I work a really graveyard shift. Well, they may be watching the stars at 2 a.m. Yeah, you can see the stars at 2 a.m. here, still no moon up. And even when the moon comes up, now after last quarter, it's getting thinner and thinner. So these green days are the best, but you can see the stars on any of the days. It's just the moon's going to compete the most when it's full. And then we also happen to have, this is a very prominent meteor shower that comes around every year called the Geminid meteor shower. And this year, it happens to be falling during the sweet spot. So the moon won't be in the way. Last year, we actually, I think, had a super moon for the Geminids, so you didn't get to see as many. But this can be nobody knows from one year to the next whether it's going to turn out to be a great meteor shower, but it's supposed to peak on the night after dark on the 13th and all the way up to midnight and then into the early morning hours. This is supposed to be the best time, but you might still see meteors on the 15th, the 16th. You might see some on the 12th. You can see meteors on any night, but you're supposed to get a much greater volume of meteors so that you see more per hour during a meteor shower.
That's Friday night special. Hopefully there's still a few hangers around on the 15th.
Yeah, and it'll be great. No moon until 4 a.m. So that'll be a good, that gives you a good idea of when's the best time to go out and look for the stars. Now let's take a look at where the planets are. So this is a top-down view. So I'm using north as top. People in Australia will say, hey, wait a minute, come on, stop favoring north all the time. But we're looking down on the solar system. This is the north, looking down on the north pole of the Earth. So there's Jupiter's orbit. Saturn is a visible planet, but right now it's basically directly opposite the sun from the Earth, so we can't see it. So I didn't even zoom out to Saturn on this one. But I want to show you, basically as we're rotating, if you look down on the Earth from the north, here's my Earth, looking down from the north. on my flat Earth there, right? Just kidding. Here I am in California, but here's the North Pole. So which way does this thing turn? Which way does it rotate?
Not that way. Yes.
No, it does. It does rotate this way, because the East Coast. See, I'm looking down on North America. Here's the eastern seaboard with New York City, and here's California. So the time zone is earlier in the east, right? The sun comes up for them. It's 3 hours ahead from California. So we're rotating this way. So this little pink Earth, you can think of this big blue Earth, shrink it down and put it on top of that pink Earth. That little pink Earth is rotating the same way, counterclockwise when you look at it from the top. Okay?
Okay.
And actually, if you think about a watch face, this is something that's kind of cool I thought about. A watch face, why do the hands go clockwise? Because the Earth is turning counterclockwise from the north. So if you look down at an analog watch, the North Pole is in the middle. If you think of the hands as standing still, like the hour hand stands still, and the Earth is turning around underneath it, that's what tells you the time. I don't know if that makes sense. I could draw it out, but that's how you remember that the Earth turns counterclockwise from the top down. Because if the hands stood still, the Earth would turn underneath the hands. So you would see, oh, look, the East Coast is coming up on the 3 o'clock hand. All right. I lost some listeners on that one.
No, it's okay.
Anyway.
So I can see, though, how the little Earth is spinning there. And you can see that it's spinning, and as the continents come around, you're catching the sun there, yeah.
The sun's going to get uncovered. So if the sun is here on this chart, that means the sun's down here. So right now, if California is on the other side, if the sun's down here, it's nighttime in California, and I can see the horizon. This yellow line represents the horizon. So I can see the stars out here, but I can't see Mars yet. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If I'm standing on this side of the Earth, I can see all these beautiful stars out this way, but I can't see the sun yet. But as we move along, as the Earth turns, I'm not even talking about going around on its orbit. I'm just talking about the Earth turning. Now the horizon is going to bring new stars are going to start to rise from this side of the Earth. Is that making sense?
Yep.
California has turned. So now I'm going to turn it again. So the Earth keeps turning through the night. Now Mars has risen. That's what I'm showing here.
Ooh, I see that in the morning.
Yes. So you can see Mars. Let me see if I can go back. Right? So as the Earth is turning, Mars comes up. Now Jupiter comes up. Now the sun comes up.
Yeah.
So you can see from this chart, this is because of the way the planets are configured. So Jupiter is out a little ahead of the sun. Mars is out a little ahead. I'm pointing with my finger. Your viewers can't see that. So Mars is out here a little ahead of the sun. So it's going to come up. It's going to clear the horizon before sunrise. Jupiter is a little ahead of the sun. So it's going to clear the horizon before sunrise. Venus is barely ahead of the sun.
Yeah, sometimes you can get all three of those in a row, I see.
Right. When it's out here,
yeah, that was like Venus 2 months ago or something.
No, not even. Like last month, it was the three planets together. You could see them.
It's moving pretty fast. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking over you. Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, you're right.
I'll talk over ground.
but when Venus is going to keep going around. When it's over here, it's going to be the evening star. Planets on this side are the morning planets. Planets on this side are the evening planets because we're spinning this way. So now the sun comes up, and now you can't see the planets very much after that. Does that make sense? So yeah. I thought that was a cool way to kind of show it. And now here's what it looks like in the sky. Here's the morning. It's 5 a.m., 5:24 a.m. on, I just picked the 16th, but you can see this now. Here's the south. I'm facing to the south. Over in the east, the sun is going to pop up over here. But as I'm turning, before I uncover the sun with the horizon. I'm going to uncover Mars, then I'm going to uncover Jupiter. Then finally, Venus will pop up, but the sun's glow will already be so bright, it might be hard to see, might be impossible to see, but then the sun will come up and drown all this out. But that's exactly what I was showing here. This is the Earth turning around. So there's your planet lineup for this month. The best planets to see are going to be, if you get up early in the morning, look to the east, go get a clear view of the eastern horizon. You should be able to see Mars and Jupiter, and it's basically a line. It's a line that, this is the line that the sun is going to take across the sky. All the star planets and the moon pretty much follow that same line because it's this.
Because it's flat.
It's that level. But the solar system is fairly flat, I guess. Although, anyway, let's not get bogged down in that.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to bring in the constellations that you'll see in the morning. So this is for our early risers, anyone who's able to get up before the sunrise. These are all the constellations that are there. So,
Nice.
So this is Virgo. So Mars. This is Virgo's brightest star, Spica, and this is a cool little constellation, Corvus the Crow. And I'll show it to you without. It looks like a little crow staring right at Spica. So that bright star, Spica, in a pretty good line with Mars and Jupiter. That's the brightest star in the constellation Virgo. And the crow is looking right at that star like it's a shiny object that the crow wants to grab with its beak. And Virgo is a zodiac constellation. That's why Mars, Jupiter, and the Sun pass through the zodiac. And there's Leo ahead of Virgo and Cancer the Crab. So we'll talk about some of those, but these are your early morning constellations. So if you get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and look to the east, you'll be able to see Corvus the Crow looking at Spica. Virgo is a little tougher to pick out if you're not used to picking out Virgo. We'll highlight Virgo in a different Skies Over Grimerica. But I want to continue on to the concept of the equinoxes and the solstices. Here's some
Christmas solstice.
So the December Christmas solstice I want to get into. So here's some of your night sky. I'm just going to plow ahead a little bit. We'll get into the solstice, but are you guys familiar with this constellation right here that's rising up in the east? It looks much bigger when you see it in real life, but I've zoomed out to show a whole bunch of constellations. So now here we are at almost 7 p.m. So who is this with the 3 bright stars rising right
He's
there?
the Archer dude.
Orion.
Yeah, that's Orion. So Orion is
actually
coming up.
own a star in the Orion constellation. I bought it for my wife for Valentine's
Oh my
Day.
God. Cheesy.
It's right
Now
there.
they never stop emailing me.
Where is it? Right there. Where is it?
It's there. No, down closer, just off the sword.
Oh, really? Okay.
Klingon
So the sword is
country.
hanging down. Okay, so Orion is looming up and clearing the horizon by about 7 p.m. He'll be fully in the sky. So let me bring in all the outlines. So here's his upraised arm. But I want to show your viewers there's some really cool things that now, these are the winter constellations that are really starting to rise in the east, and they'll just keep getting higher in the sky as the night goes on. I've picked a pretty early time to just show when Orion is looming up. But Orion is reaching out towards this V-shaped, it's not a full constellation, it's part of Taurus. This is a really cool figure right here called the Hyades, and there's the Pleiades that we talked about last time. So up from those 3 belt stars in a line, you can see the Hyades, and they're pretty bright. They've got this star right here, Aldebaran.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty reddish in color, and then the Pleiades are about, it's like one more feature up from Orion. So that's in the head of the bull. This is the outline of the bull from H.A. Rey, and normally I love H.A. Rey's outlines, but that's not really the way I envision the outline of the bull. I actually use, here's the V-shaped Hyades. I actually go straight to these two stars that are right out from the V-shaped Hyades, and I just think of the bull as this V, this jawbone shape. If you trace your jawbone, you'll see that it's a V shape, and then straight out from that V are these two horn stars, and that looks a lot more like a bull to me. Like this is its head, there's its two stars, and they're pretty far out there. You guys seeing that?
Yep.
And that will help you see this constellation right here, because once you've located these two horns and you know that they're in the bull, so here it is without the lines. So here's Orion, here's the Hyades, there's the V of the Hyades, there's the two horns. Now you know that they're not, because otherwise you'll get them confused with the star groupings. And this is the charioteer. His name is Auriga the charioteer. And he's got this sharp jawline and this broken nose, this bright eye, and a cone-shaped hat. This is the way H.A. Ray outlines Auriga the charioteer. He says, oh, he looks like a tough lantern-jawed charioteer with a broken nose. He's just a head in the sky. But these two stars are easy to confuse with the twins of Gemini. Before I knew the constellations very well, I would think, oh yeah, the twins are close to Orion. And I would sometimes look up here and think, oh, that's the twins. That's not the twins. That's Capella, the brightest star in the charioteer, and his second brightest star, that's the back of his head. So if you can find, your viewers can look for these three belt stars, can look up to the V-shaped Hyades, can find the stars of the horns of the bull, then you can find this jaw, those two stars that form this jaw. You have to not get them confused with the bull down here. Then you'll be able to trace out this head. And then above that is Perseus, whom we've talked about in previous talks. Also, here's
so
Aries.
Those would all be rising, right?
Yeah, this is the east. I'm looking to the east. These are all rising at like 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Right, and then now I'm going to move ahead in the time.
That's the one good thing about winter. That's the beauty about this year, actually, right now, because it's like above zero here, so it's probably like 45 Fahrenheit right now. And it gets dark at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Nice. So here's the same setup and so you guys have great views of it. This is what's called the winter circle, the winter stars. These are really great constellations and stars. So I've just moved the same stars we were looking at. Orion was down here, right, rising behind the letter E.
Yeah.
At 7 o'clock. Now we're almost 3 hours later. It's at 9:45 p.m. Here's your three stars of Orion's belt. So you can find your V-shaped Hyades. You can go from the top of the V to find the horns of the bull, right?
Yeah.
Beyond that, you've got the Pleiades. There's your charioteer. And now the twins are up. Here's your twins. The twins are basically off the shoulder, this bright shoulder of Orion, Betelgeuse. Whoops. I don't think I had that lined up perfectly, but here they are a little higher in the sky. So here's Orion. They jumped a little bit when I clicked the button, but here's the twins of Gemini. You see how they're off of his shoulder? If you go straight up from Orion, that's how you get to the charioteer.
So isn't there some myths where like Orion's chasing those fucking kids over the river?
Yes. So this is prime. These are a lot of important myths are around here. In fact, when Osiris is drowned in a river and sent out to sea, Isis asks two children, there's two youths or two children who are sitting there by the river, who point her in the right direction and said, oh, yeah, I saw his coffin floating by. So it's these children next to the river, and this bull, Orion is putting out his hand to grasp this V shape. Samson puts out his hand to grasp the jawbone of an ass. So, whoops, I went a little too far, but the bull with his long horns could also be a donkey with long ears. So instead of that being the jawbone of a bull, could be the jawbone of a donkey. That's what Samson grabs as his weapon. He reaches out his hand to grab the jawbone, just like Orion is reaching out towards this V-shaped Hyades there. So there's a lot of myths we could get into, but I do want to show this circle of very bright stars is pretty noticeable in the night sky in the winter. So if your viewers are familiar with, if you go up from the 3 stars, you can get to the V-shaped Hyades and to the Pleiades. If you go down from the 3 stars of the belt, you'll find the brightest star in the sky, which is
the North Star. Penguin.
Polaris. Polaris. Yeah, Polaris is nowhere near. This isn't Polaris. Polaris is behind our heads as we're looking to the south. Polaris is back behind our heads. It's the North Star, and it's actually not very bright, but there's not that much around it. But the 3 stars point down to Sirius. Sirius, the dog star. Yeah,
Important star.
That's a super important star. So this makes
where
the
little
winter
tiny dudes come from.
Yeah, so Sirius has a lot of ancient associations. It was a super important star in ancient Egypt. But from Sirius, you can trace basically a circle of bright stars that go up to the eye of Capella, the charioteer that we talked about, coming down through his second brightest star to these 2 bright stars of the twins of Gemini. These are the heads of the twins of Gemini. Castor is the less bright one. Pollux is the brighter one. And so this makes a circle down to Sirius. Oops, I keep pressing my right button. Sorry about that. So from the heads of the twins, you get to, this is called Procyon. It's the little dog, the Canis Minor, and this is Canis Major. Procyon means before the dog. So this bright star basically rises before the great dog and the dog star of Sirius. But that's your winter circle of stars, very bright, and they just keep getting higher in the sky as the night goes on and as we progress throughout the month.
Is that 10 o'clock now?
Yeah, so this is 10 o'clock. So I just wanted to familiarize everybody with these 3 bright stars of Orion. Most people, if they know no other constellation, they do know the 3 bright stars of Orion, because I want to talk about them as it pertains to the winter solstice and the Christmas story.
Okay.
So I'll just drive on unless there's any questions or comments. Because I'm going to get into, I wanted to get into that one.
The 3 kings?
So I like Christmas.
Yeah, the 3 kings. Exactly.
Is Orion one of the kings?
Well, the 3 belt stars may have something to do with the 3 kings. Yes. Yeah, so that was a great thought by Graham. So this would be a good time to turn off the video if you don't want to hear that the Bible is connected to the stars. So, I don't
want your Christmas festivities ruined by facts.
I would say that
it could be both.
It doesn't ruin anything, because as Alvin Boyd Kuhn, I like to quote his quotation says, these ancient stories, they're so full of ancient wisdom, are 1,000 times more precious as myth than as alleged history. Because when we turn it into history, then it becomes an external thing. Oh, this is about a certain people in a certain time. Oh, and if you believe in this external person, then you can be part of this group, but everyone else is excluded, and it starts to become dividing. And then we have to go around to other parts of the world and say, hey, your myths are wrong because my myths are historically true. So anyway, not to get off on too much of a tangent, I would argue that you can still have all the beauty of the myths without the problems that come from taking them literally. But if this is really going to offend you and you don't want the Christmas story tied to the stars, now would be a good time to walk out of the the theater where you're watching this movie on Skies Over Grimerica. So, but I'm going to tie it into the winter solstice. So here's a diagram of the of the sun's path through the zodiac signs. It's really caused by the Earth's path around the sun, but I've divided it into, I've shown where the solstices and equinoxes are. So the way this one is oriented, the equinoxes are on the two X's. So the horizontal line separates the upper half of the year, where days are longer than nights, from the lower half where nights are longer than days. So if these two are the equinoxes, if we're going around, this one's arranged clockwise, you could arrange them however you want.
So then the purple one would be the solstice?
Yeah, so this is, oops, I got my mouse too high. The purple line is the solstices. So this is the summer solstice, the very highest point on the year. This is the winter solstice, the very lowest point of the year. So if we're going around this way, when we cross this equinox, at the equinox, days are roughly equal to nights. There is a point where they're exactly equal. It may not be on the exact equinox for a variety of reasons, because the sun starts to bring light before it actually crests the horizon. Gordon Freeman talks a lot about that. I think you guys had Gordon on the show.
Yeah, that's when I first realized that it wasn't at the same time all the time. I always thought it was exactly there, and it was eye-opening. For the sake of this argument, equinox, days and nights are equal. So after equinox, days are longer than nights. If the days are getting longer and longer as we go up, if they get to be equal here, then after equal, they're going to be days are longer than nights. Days keep getting longer until we get to the solstice, the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Then they start getting shorter. But they're still longer than nights because we're above the line, but they're getting shorter. They're still longer, but they are growing shorter until we get to the equinox. Now they've grown so short that they're equal, and they keep getting shorter, but now they're shorter than nights. As now, like you guys just said, hey, it's dark at 4:30 up here, or 4 o'clock. Even where I am, it's dark at like 4:30. Until we get down to the shortest day of the year, that's the winter solstice, then they turn around and start getting longer again. So that's the great turning point where the days stop getting shorter. The sun finally turns around and starts going back up. So there's all the, for those not super familiar with the signs of the zodiac, I've just labeled them. But I just show, here's the sun going around. It's getting shorter and shorter. There's your great turning point. Now it's getting longer again. So I've talked about this in various books and things, but it's really caused by the Earth going around the sun, and we're actually tilted on our axis. That's what makes the days shorter, when we're tilted away from the sun. So what I've got here is, it doesn't look like it's tilted at all, right? Right here. That's because I wanted to show you this blue line is an imaginary line called the celestial equator. The red line is the line of the solstices. The red line is the line of the zodiac constellations and the sun. So the sun is going to take a path way higher than the celestial equator at the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, and a path that's way lower than the celestial equator on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice. And that's because we're actually tilted like I use this metaphor of a ship, like a sailing ship. If this is the North Pole, the front of the ship, we basically go around the sun with the ship pointing in the same way all the time. So the North Pole always basically points the same way in space as we go around. At least this is the model. So that means when we're all the way over here, when the North Pole is pointed most towards the sun, people in the Northern Hemisphere are getting the most rays because the North Pole is tilted towards the sun. So you guys up in Canada are getting all this rays because you're close to the North Pole, right? So that's the sun is highest in the sky when the ship is here and the North Pole is towards the sun. We're having summer in the Northern Hemisphere. What's happening in the Southern Hemisphere? They're having a winter. Because when this thing keeps spinning around on its axis, so when they get towards the sun, the
their side of the Earth is away from the sun, so they're getting the shortest days. So that's what causes your solstices and equinoxes. And I can show it to you. How are we doing on time here, guys?
Okay.
How long have we been going?
I have no idea.
Okay, so let me wipe out. Let me just show you what's happening in Stellarium. I think I might have showed this to you guys before, but here I am standing on the Earth. This is the sun. I'm going to bring it back to its highest point in the sky. You can see it's actually in the constellation of Taurus in the month that I've got it right here in May. Yeah, that is the whale. That's Cetus the whale. It's a hard constellation to see, but good call, Darren. Found the whale. So here's the sun. When the sun is at high noon, can you see any constellations?
No.
No.
Unless
so this sky,
eclipse.
right? Good call. And we're in John Day, Oregon.
That's
We're
right.
close to it. So if there's an eclipse, you can see a few stars. Although I have to admit, I didn't see. I don't think I saw. All I saw was the planet Venus. But I couldn't take my eyes off the sun. But during the day, we can't see the stars. But the sun is in a certain constellation, and as we go through the year, it's going to move through different constellations. So let me take away the Earth beneath our feet. So now we can see all the way down to the way down there. That's the southern pole, the south celestial pole. So this whole sphere, pretend like you're standing and here's space, and don't step too far forward or you'll fall all the way down to the south pole down there in space. Like
So
this thing's
you're
wrapping
inside the
around.
hollow earth.
You're inside the hollow. You're inside the hollow sphere of the heavens. It's not really a sphere. I mean, unless the Earth is flat, maybe it is. But here's what's happening as we go. Whoops, I'm going too fast. As we go through the year, you see what I'm moving down here? I'm moving ahead one day at a time. The sun is moving through the different constellations, and that's because, and it's getting higher and lower in the sky at noon. I'm keeping us basically at noon. See, it's 12 o'clock here. It changed because of daylight savings time. But basically, as I move through the year, the sun at noon will be lower
So now
during
he's
the
in
winter.
Archer.
Yeah, Sagittarius. So this is the lowest point. So the sun gets through its lowest point in the winter. This is the sun at noon is barely getting up into the sky here in the northern hemisphere. Why? Because of that tilt. Because we're tilted away at the winter solstice. But as we get around to the summer solstice, the sun at noon is going to be much higher until it keeps getting higher and higher because we're tilting as we're coming around the Earth. The front of our ship, where the North Pole is pointing more towards the sun. The North Pole never points directly towards the sun, but it's pointing more towards the sun. So there's its highest point. Did you see that? It was going.
So that's
it's going
June
up.
21st, 2020.
That's a great little shot
That's
of all the
June
planets going around the sun as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, you can see the
great.
planets moving. So you can see why the zodiac is arranged to where the summer solstice is in between. That's Cancer, the crab that it's in now. That's the twins of Gemini that it's in there. So this shifts because of the precession of the equinoxes over the ages, but basically it's still reaching its highest point pretty close to where it was on that diagram. It's now reaching it closer to, let me show you what's happening. We're going to cross the celestial equator. See this? That's the zero line. I've put in these lines because that's the celestial equator. When we cross that line, that's when the equinox happens. Days are still longer, but they're getting shorter. Now we're coming through Leo, now Virgo, boom. We just hit the line. That's the zero line. So here is where the fall equinox is happening. And as we keep going, now we're below the line. The sun still comes up, unless you're in the Arctic Circle, but the sun at noon is not as high anymore. And our days are getting shorter and shorter, and we're getting down to our lowest point between Scorpio and Sagittarius. We're getting down to the lowest point until finally, we reach the turning point. It starts to go back up. And there's Capricorn, Aquarius. We're going to cross that line again on the way back up in between Aquarius and Pisces, because we're moving into the age of Aquarius. Boom, there, it's crossing the line here. So we're moving out of Pisces into Aquarius. We used to be in the age of Aries like 2,000 years ago, and that's what that diagram is actually depicting, the age of Aries. Not to get too technical, I want to get into some myths here, but this is a cool way of showing, if you think about it, that zodiac chart that I was showing you is really just a shorthand for this.
Yeah, that's
This is like a way that people figured out, hey, instead of drawing all the constellations in the sky, why don't I just draw this wheel and the sun moving through the wheel? Oops. I got out of my presentation. Anyhow, so that shows you what's going on through the year, and those motions are going to be the handles that the myths tie into to talk about things like our higher self, getting in touch with our higher consciousness. The turning point of the year is when we start to realize, hey, wait a minute, we're not just spirit. We're not just physical. We're also spirit. See, when
that sun is at its lowest point, then it's the shortest day when Orion comes up. How does the Orion fit into the winter solstice and the Christmas thing?
Yeah, good question. So Orion is actually close to the Gemini twins. So you say, wait a minute, what's Dave's talking about? So this what I'm showing you here is like the big picture for how all the myths, the language that they're speaking. So as you're going down towards the winter solstice, this represents the upper half, the sunny side. This is where the days are longer. This is where the nights are longer. Which side do you think represents life, and which side do you think represents death? The sunny side or the
sunny side is life?
That's what you would think. That is what would be normal, right? Up here, this is life. We're up in the sunny side. And down here is after we die, we go down into the underworld. But Alvin Boyd Kuhn, who I got this idea from, says that's exactly what we would think, but that's not the way the ancient myths work. They depict life in this body as being the lower realm, because we're in a physical, mortal body. The body dies. Yes. The spirit realm is where the immortal soul lives. So when you're up here, this is before you're born, this is when you're in spirit world. Then you take on a body here in Virgo at the fall equinox, and you plunge down into the lower half of the year where your vision of spirit has been darkened by the fact that you've got a body in the way. And so you're getting caught up in all kinds of things. Oh, I want to go chase that girl. Oh, I want to get into a fight with this guy. Oh, I've got to feed myself. So I'm going to have to compromise my integrity so that I can keep my job. And there's all these distractions of, well, if I don't feed my body, it's going to die. So at first we get caught up completely in the body, and then we start to realize, wait a minute, that's not all that there is. I actually have a higher self. There's actually spirit. There's actually lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, people talking about, being able to do remote vision, or the spirit world, shamans. What is a shaman? It's someone who's able to go to the spirit world more readily than us normal people. But actually, us normal people are also able to get in contact with the spirit world. It's just that a shaman has like a special gift to do that, or special training to do that, or special choosing to do that. But sometimes there's some things you can only fix in the spirit world. There's some things you can only learn in the spirit world. So anyway, down here, this turning point, the myths talk about that as that's the turning point where you, the soul, you start to realize, hey, I've got a higher self. You start to get in touch with the Christ within, or with your higher self, with your spirit self, with all these things that can't be explained with just the physical material. So that turning point is super important, and it's going to be embodied in all these myths in 100,000 different ways. So now let's get to your excellent question, Graham. Is like, well, wait a minute. What does that have to do with Orion? Let me get back to the slide that I'm supposed to be on. The three kings coming to the birth of the Christ. That the birth of these Christ figures or Buddha figures or even the second birth. Some gods will have two mothers. Osiris will have Isis and Nephthys. Dionysus has two mothers. Dionysus has three births because finally Zeus has to give birth to Dionysus the last time because he burns up his second mother. You can read the story of Dionysus in online and in my Star Myths of the World Volume 2. But a lot of these second births or the spiritual birth will happen at the bottom of the year. The physical birth happens at the solstice. The spiritual birth, the birth of the higher awareness of your higher self, you're getting in touch with the divinity, will happen at the lowest part of the year. That's where the second birth happens. So here's the Bible story of the three kings, the visit of the three kings. I zoomed in a little bit so people could see it a little better. And I've underlined, here's the wise men. They came from the east to Jerusalem. I've shown this in a video, so bear with me if you've seen it before, but I think it's so powerful to show that the Bible is not talking about historical, literal figures. They came from the east to Jerusalem, and down here at the bottom of the left-hand side of your screen, I've underlined verse 9, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. So they came from the east, but a star in the east went before them, right? So I've put on the screen here, if north is up on this map, which this is an old map, and north is up, east is to the right, west is to the left. They came from the east, which is right on our map. They followed a star in the east that went before them. If the star in the east went before them, which direction would they be going?
East.
Yeah, to the right. So how would they get to Jerusalem? If they came from the east, they'd have to go all the way to China, then cross the Pacific and come all the way back around, land in North Africa, and keep going east and finally get to Jerusalem. If this is talking about literal terrestrial history, right? If the star they came from the east, the star was in the east, it doesn't work on the ground. That's one of the places in the Bible that it doesn't really work for literal terrestrial, but it works really well in the heavens because all the objects in the sky, the sun is the most familiar one, rise in the east and set in the west. So here we have Orion in the east. He's going to go from the east to the west because I'm looking towards the south. There's Orion. And as we move through the Earth keeps rotating, he's going to move towards the west. And so he's coming from the east. So there's your three kings coming from the east. And now they're going to see the star of the child of the virgin. Here's Virgo. Virgo will be rising, just like Orion's rising now. We saw at like 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. Virgo's not rising until basically she's fully above the horizon at about 3:45 a.m. So you can see her in the morning like we saw. So the three kings have come across from the east, and now they're going to see his star in the east. And this is a statue of, do you know who this is?
Virgo.
Put you on the spot. Yes. So this is the goddess Isis from ancient Egypt, but I believe she lines up with Virgo because this is her son, her child Horus, the Horus child, the god Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis, is lined up with that star. You see this distinctive outstretched arm of Virgo here? You see at the end of her outstretched arm is the child. This is the divine child. This is the star of the divine child. The brightest star in Virgo, as we said, is Spica. The second brightest star is her distinctive outstretched arm. And in a lot of myths, like the Adam and Eve story, if the character is played by Virgo, there'll be an outstretched arm. Like Eve reached out her hand to take the fruit, then she reached out and gave the fruit to her husband, Adam. This outstretched arm, this star right here, is the star of the divine child. And you can see that in this statue of Isis from the 4th century BC. But there's a lot of parallels between all these stories of as Osiris, who's connected with Orion, is sinking down, Horus, the child of Orion and Isis, is rising up over here. And you can even see that the outline of Virgo, Isis wears this distinctive, like throne-shaped shape on her head. She's often seated in a throne because Virgo, the virgin in the sky, she actually looks like she's giving birth. If she's lying on her back, she's got her feet elevated and apart. So in a lot of the myths, she's giving birth to a constellation that comes after her. But in other myths, she'll be depicted as riding on a lion. You see this lion right in front of her?
Yep.
Or being pulled in a chariot with lions, or standing on the back of a lion. And in some myths, she'll be on a throne with lions on either side of her. You'll see that with like some of the goddesses of ancient Greece, and where Turkey is today. The goddesses from that region will be seated on a throne with the lions on either side. But this shape that Isis wears on her head looks like the throne shape outline of Virgo. You see that?
And that's on Christmas Day then, or is that right before Christmas Day?
So let's get to the how it might relate to the story of the three kings, the visit of the three kings. So here we have the three kings that came from the east. They see the child's star in the east. And when this is the situation in the sky, this is the constellation Cancer the Crab. So these are the zodiac signs of here's Taurus, here's Gemini, here's Cancer the Crab, here's Leo the Lion, here's Virgo. So in between Leo and the Gemini twins is Cancer. There's Leo and Gemini. Cancer is a pretty faint constellation, but in that constellation, there's the brilliant cluster. I think I might have talked about it with you guys before, the beehive cluster. Here's Cancer again. Here's Leo. Can you see right here, there's a cluster of stars?
Yep.
If your viewers are watching on an iPhone, they'll probably be like, what? So you have to go put this on your desktop or on a big screen TV. But I'm going to zoom in again to help everybody out. This cluster is visible with the naked eye. It's a beautiful cluster, and it's called the beehive cluster. It's also designated in modern times, we call it Messier Object 44. That's a categorization system for objects in the sky. So it's M44, and you can see it if you know where to look. You can see it in front of the mouth of Leo. But now we can see the whole story of the three kings. Remember, it doesn't work very well on the ground, but it works just fine if there's your three kings that came from the east. Wise men from the east is how it's described, or magi. There's the divine child, the holy child, the star, the child of the virgin rising up in the east. So they came from the east. There's in the east. And now here at the highest point in the sky, this is at midnight, opposite at the turning point of the year. It happens at midnight on the winter solstice. That's when the year turns around and the sun figuratively begins to go back up that hill again, right? So there's where we have the beehive cluster, which in ancient times was also given the name Prisepi, which you can look this up. It's not even disputed. It means the manger. So that is the manger in the beehive cluster. It's So at midnight, the child is being born, the son is being reborn at midnight. And nowadays, this is a little later in the year. This is going to happen at midnight, like in February, because the precession of the equinoxes. But back in the time of the previous ages, this was the situation when the son was being reborn. This was the manger was in the middle of the sky.
We'll come back around to it in like 20,000 years.
Yeah, like the
I'll
whole
hold you to that.
cycle.
No, 20,
Yeah, the whole-
24,000 maybe.
So you guys also have to do maybe you could do like a Kickstarter, GoFundMe campaign for, a camera that will last for 25,000 years and somehow send the pictures back to us today. I don't
So
know.
what you're saying is like 2,000 years ago, or
So we'll be lucky
over
if
2,000 years ago, it was over that. It was on Christmas Day when that was
We'll be lucky if we're still
Well, it's on the
traveling
evening of the winter
intercontinentally in
solstice.
50
evening of the winter solstice. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's the argument. This argument actually comes from a preacher named Robert Taylor who gave these sermons in the 1820s called the Astronomico Theological Lectures. And that's where the term astrotheology comes from. So this is his argument for the three wise men from the East. And I think it's pretty compelling argument because it doesn't work terrestrially. But there's even one more piece. Robert Taylor didn't write about this that I know of, but I found another part that's celestial in nature here in chapter 2, verse 12. The three wise men are warned in a dream. That's where you get messages from the spirit world. That's one way of getting messages. That they should not return to Herod. So they departed into their own country another way. So they didn't go back the way they came from. Do stars go back to where they came from the same way that they came?
No.
No. So we got to go back another way. How are they going to go back to where they came from? They're going to go that way.
Set.
Yeah, they got to set, and they're going to go the lower route to get back home to the east. So I think that the Bible is talking in celestial metaphor when it talks about the birth of the divine child. This is not talking about literal historical. It's talking about real truths, but it's not talking about literal wise men that came from the east. It's pointing to the infinite realm. These are things that take place not just in the stars, but in the infinite realm, which is a real realm. That's where shamans go to when they're journeying to fix a problem. They go to the infinite realm, and then they come back. So how do we tell people about the infinite realm? Well, we're going to use visual language from the most infinite realm that we can see, and that's the heavens. So that's what I think is going on here.
Yeah, interesting.
So I don't know if we have time. I can show you one more, or we can, cut it off there.
Yeah, what do you think? It's getting pretty
We
late.
should probably wrap
Yeah.
it up there. Yeah, I think we've ruined Christmas. That's probably as good a note as any.
No, it's not ruining Christmas. So I want to
No,
show you.
I agree. I'm always excited to explain to my kids about the equinox.
Yeah. So I think this has to do with, let me go back to my presentation just to wrap it up. I think this has to do with getting
Solstice.
in touch with your higher self. You've got a higher self. Everyone has a higher self. So have I shown you guys this picture before?
Nice.
That's it. This is a picture from spring training. I think it was the Pirates organization in Major League Baseball. And this was before the season that just finished. This was spring training for this season, and one of the Pirate batters lost a bat. It flew out of his hands and flew towards the stands. Notice everybody's reaction. Everybody's reaction. These people are taking pretty good reaction. It's kind of funny. This guy saved the day, but he had Mr. Incredible sitting right behind him.
Huh.
Mr. Incredible is right there. But this kid was not taking the proper reaction. He looked up. That's about as much of a reaction. These kind of amazing responses that obviously this guy didn't have time to think, but his hand went out and stopped the bat from hitting. I don't know if this is his son. It probably is his son. You'll see, you can look on YouTube for like amazing dad saves, amazing mom saves, and it's usually like when a baby or a child is suddenly threatened, you'll have a dad that's like sleeping on the couch and he'll put his hand out and catch the baby. He's like half asleep, but his hand just goes out automatically. How did that happen? You can look up YouTube amazing dad saves, and you'll see these saves, and it's usually to save a child. It's like your higher self, boom, clicks in or jumps in to save the child from disaster. And this is just a kind of a dramatic illustration, but we all have a higher self that we can get into. That's what synchronicities, I think, have to do with. Or when you find yourself looking at the clock and you're like, why am I always looking at the clock and it's 1:11 or 2:22 or 3:33? Or I wake up in the middle of the night and I have this thought and I had to write it down and then it turned out if I didn't do that, it would have been a disaster. Or that guy you had on your show who had the premonition about when he started his truck and he didn't.
Double car accidents and everything.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's like your higher self. Those are little times when our higher self like breaks through to us.
Yeah.
But there's disciplines in ancient wisdom that tell us how to get more in touch with our higher self, whether it's through yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, Tai Chi, or whatever it is. Those are ways that, and I think that's what the ancient myths are really talking about. They're saying, listen, there is a divine world. I'm not saying there's no God. Mm-hmm. The ancient myths are trying to put you in touch with, hey, there is a spirit world, but don't limit it to a literal interpretation. They're trying to tell you something that's so much more that your life can tie into that is very powerful. So anyway, I'm not trying to take away anything from anybody.
No, that's good. Yeah. No, I like that.
It's all there.
Knowledge is a good Christmas present.
Yeah, if you're attracted to the Bible already, you're attracted to it because you know that there is something beautiful in there. Yeah. That's what's attracting you. Anyway, that's my.
That's good, man. I like it.
That was good. That was a good one. Yeah, I like it. We smoothed it out. It was good.
Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate your coming up with a way to do video. Like I said, I think you're the first podcast I've ever been on that's gotten the video on there because my stuff is so visual. This really helps it.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah, and I like how you correlated to the spiritual aspect and the metaphysical part and the higher self. That's obviously important to us here, for sure.
Absolutely. And now we can, everyone can look for that on Christmas Eve. No, it doesn't happen on Christmas Eve anymore.
21st. Yeah.
No, but you can go out and see the 3 stars. You can go see all those things, the Hyades, the Pleiades. Those are all tied in with myths. And just remember that this solstice means like that's starting to get in touch with your higher self. That's what it's pointing us towards, is getting in touch with our higher self. Right you can on. Do it on any day. You can do it on any day of the year.
You better do it on Christmas.
Right on. All right, buddy.
You better do it.
Right on. Big thanks to Dave. Big thanks to everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you guys in January for another.
Yeah, thanks, David.
For another edition.